The Switch 2 Direct finally landed today, and it was insane. The Direct was jammed full of all kinds of announcements and what I would call stuff, but as Metroid fans, we need to stay focused on the Prime 4 updates. Although Metroid actually had very minimal screen time in this Direct, Nintendo still delivered all kinds of implications for both past and upcoming Metroid games. Nintendo just sort of casually dropped some crazy info about this game in a 30-second clip in the middle of the Direct, and for me, this was one of the coolest snippets of the entire video. So Nintendo announced that Prime 4 will receive a Switch 2 edition, and it's going to support both quality and performance modes for the visuals, similar to what we're used to seeing on other consoles like the PS5. Incredibly, Switch 2 will offer the option to play Prime 4 in stunning 4K 60 FPS quality mode or 1080p at 120 FPS in performance mode, both with HDR support as well. In handheld mode, these adjust to 1080p at 60 FPS and 720p at 120 FPS, still with HDR. This kind of blew my mind when I saw this for a number of reasons. For starters, we've never really had any Nintendo games officially running at 4K 60, much less a graphically stunning flagship franchise like Metroid. Nintendo games tend to scale super well in terms of art style. Even the original Metroid Prime games look amazing when run through a proper upscaler. I can't wait to see what this franchise looks like in modern graphical quality. Prime 4 already looks beautiful for the original Switch hardware, and I can't wait to see what this boost offers in person on a full 4K HDR TV. The 120 FPS mode is also super interesting. Metroid Prime games tend to be fairly slow-paced for first-person shooters or first-person adventures, whatever you want to call it. I'm curious to see if there's a larger focus on combat in this game and how the 120 FPS mode will feel. Personally, I'm sure 4K 60 will be my preferred mode, since I've always thought the jump to 120 is not as significant in terms of feel versus going from 30 to 60, but we'll see. I also can't wait to experience how the world of Vuros pops in HDR. This is all just wild. Nintendo also mentioned the game will support the new mouse controls offered by the upgraded Joy-Cons. Mouse controls seem to sort of be the new motion controls in this Direct, and I'm curious to see what this feels like when adapted to Metroid. Obviously, you'd have to use a tabletop of some sort, but I'm really curious to see how responsive and natural this feels and how it compares to motion controls. Speaking of which, it wasn't confirmed, but I'm wondering if this means we'll also receive a motion control option like Prime Remastered, since the game clearly supports multiple control modes. Now this is all great, but the most interesting part of this announcement for me are just the wider implications this has for Switch hardware and the future of the franchise. You see, the jump from 60 FPS at 1080p all the way up to 4K is significantly more demanding in terms of raw hardware power and processing. I'm wondering how much this 4K is using the upscaling techniques supposedly present in the Switch 2, or what the actual native resolution will be. Is this 1440p upscaled to 4K? Or is the game actually running at 4K or near 4K natively, because it's originally a Switch 1 game at heart? Exactly how much more powerful is the Switch 2? Obviously there are some general specs floating around out there, but this is a big jump in performance, and I'm fascinated to see what it means for future games. You see, this jump implies that the Switch 2 can just absolutely crunch through the Prime 4 game engine, which performs extremely well even on the original Switch. And so I'm curious what this means for a potential Prime 5 or future Metroid game developed from the ground up for Switch 2. That game would potentially look incredible. Now, Nintendo also revealed upgraded versions of various Switch games such as Breath of the Wild and Mario Party. However, this also made me wonder if we might get an upgraded version or patch for Metroid Prime Remastered or Metroid Dread to also enable 4K 60 or 1080p 120 FPS. If you told me a few years ago, before Prime Remastered released, that we might be playing Metroid Prime 1 at 4K 60 FPS with remastered graphics, I'd think you were crazy, but now that suddenly seems very possible. Surprisingly, unless I've missed it somewhere in all this chaos today, we still did not get a release date for Prime 4, which is sort of odd. I think it's fairly safe to say that this is not a Switch 2 launch title at this point, and that means Prime 4 is probably the big holiday game for this year, since Mario Kart World is at launch and Donkey Kong is the big summer game. I'm fine with that personally. I hope they take all the time they need. Now, one forgotten topic during this Switch 2 Direct, or even other recent news, is Prime 2 and 3 Remastered. The reason I think this is slightly odd is that the Prime Trilogy art book is still slated to release this summer around the time of Switch 2, and Prime 4 is coming a bit later probably, so I thought we'd at least get basic ports of those games. Prime 4 continues to be heavily featured in Nintendo marketing right now, so I thought they'd want to make the trilogy available. Well, interestingly, we might actually still receive Prime 2 through the newly announced GameCube Virtual Console. I could see this being added to the service this summer or in the fall leading up to Prime 4 with cleaned up resolution, just like the other GameCube games shown. However, that leaves Prime 3 out of the picture since that was originally a Wii game. Maybe Nintendo will choose to just forget about Prime 3 since it's arguably the weakest or least appreciated entry in the trilogy. So what did you think of the Metroid content in this Direct or the wider implications of this news? Are you as excited as I am for 4K 60 FPS Metroid? I think this is going to be crazy. I definitely need to get my hands on a Switch 2 at launch. Please consider subscribing for more Switch 2 coverage, leave a comment, and let's discuss.